Teleprompters. They're a device that I've taken an interest in for a very long time, and well, I've actually tried various workarounds to try and replicate the effect to varying levels of success. In fact, most of the time they weren't very successful, and that is why I decided to bite the bullet and actually try and build the real thing. So in this particular video, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the experience of, building a teleprompter and actually using it. You're watching another Random Wednesday episode on 0612 TV. Hello and welcome to another Random Wednesday episode. So, building a teleprompter. Now, I've got to admit I did follow several tutorials, or at least make reference to them, so I'm gonna post the one that it's most similar to what I built in the video description below. So feel free to check it out. In fact, if you want to build one of your own, you might want to check out that tutorial or any other tutorial on YouTube, because what I've built is literally held together by tape. So yeah, have a bit of fair warning, you shouldn't be following what I did. But yeah, like I said, a teleprompter is something that apparently a lot of people like to DIY, and it seems to be almost a little rite of passage in the filmmaking, which is of course another reason why I've been interested to build it for a very long time. In addition to that, there are many times in which I like to be able to, actually use a teleprompter. So, well, I decided to go ahead and build it. But before we begin actually talking about building this device, let's try to understand a little bit better how this works. Essentially, all there is to it is a piece of glass that is held at a 45-degree angle. Basically, what you need to do is you need to place some kind of screen underneath the glass. The idea is text that appears on the screen will get reflected by the glass towards, the person who is actually speaking. Then, we place a camera behind the glass so that it looks directly at the person. And the whole effect we're trying to achieve is basically for a person to appear very eloquent because they're looking directly at a camera and they're saying some complicated stuff, but in fact, they're actually just reading off a script. The cool part about the effect you can achieve is that the text, which appears quite clear to the reader, is actually not visible to the camera lens itself. And basically, that's what actually, makes the whole thing work. Teleprompters are very commonly used in areas like news or, at speeches. Essentially, they have this thing there to just make it easier for a person to deliver whatever lines they need to deliver. Of course, as you would imagine in my particular line of work, which is YouTube videos, this can come in pretty handy as well, seeing as that I spend the vast majority of the time just speaking to a camera. Of course, I'm not using it right now because I'm reserving it for videos that really need it. As it turns out, writing a script is pretty difficult as well, which is why most of the time I just wing it. Anyway, enough of that. Let us now move on to actually think about building the actual teleprompter. This is not a very expensive project to take on. In fact, I simply just bought a piece of corrugated board as well as a photo frame. And all I need from the photo frame is just the little piece of glass that, is part of the entire setup. Then, using the piece of glass as a guide, I basically cut out 3 pieces of the corrugated board. As you can see, they are just, roughly cut to roughly the same size. And basically, these pieces will form the top and bottom of the teleprompter. My intention was to actually have 2 pieces at the bottom so that the bottom is slightly thicker than the top. And of course, it basically gives me a way to mount it onto a tripod. So then now we need to think about how we want to prop up the piece of glass at a 45-degree angle. So the way I tried to achieve that was actually cut out a square piece, which is as long as, the shorter edge of the piece of glass. Since this piece is square, if I were to cut it exactly through the diagonal, what I'll get is basically 2 triangles, and these are at 45-degree angles. As you can see, this is exactly how I intended to prop up the piece of glass. So I'll just have one of the rectangular pieces as the base. I'll have the 2 triangles just stuck perpendicularly to the base, and they will actually form an angle that I can then place the glass on. So basically, there is a lot of taping going on at this point to, make sure everything holds together, and then we introduce the piece of glass, and then a lot more tape goes on. Essentially, after some messing around, eventually I get something that looks like this. There are the two triangles now sitting nicely. I have the piece of glass also sitting nicely, but I realized that I don't actually need triangles because there is actually, just an additional bit of the board sticking out that I don't need. So all I did was I took some scissors and cut those off. And basically we have what we need to create a teleprompter, and that is that piece of glass that is held at a 45-degree angle. The next area of concern is how to actually mount this, because of course we want to put the camera behind it and it needs to be at a particular height that I can actually read off. To do that, I took one of my other rectangles and basically just cut a hole in it. I have this little nut which is the correct size to fit onto the tripod mount. Basically I just cut out a hole in the cardboard, making sure that it is slightly smaller, and I just embedded the nut and held it there with tape. Remember, all this is held by tape. It's generally not a very good idea, but I just needed something that worked, so that does the job. Anyway, now that I have that base with the nut embedded, I just join that to the existing teleprompter that I have. I just stuck the two base pieces together. After testing out the setup, I realized that, well, it did work, but basically what I did was I draped a black jumper over both my camera as well as the teleprompter. And what happens is the fabric actually sags towards the center and sort of blocks the lens. So at some times the camera isn't actually capturing the full frame, and that is where the last rectangle actually comes in handy. Really all I'm doing is to basically give it a bit of a roof, and what this does is, well, it just prevents the fabric from dropping down. So of course I held that in place with tape as well, and that creates the final product. Speaking of the final product, it looks something like this. So as mentioned, we have two rectangles at the base. I hope you can see this. And well, that's the embedded nut, which allows me to actually, just get this onto a tripod. These are the two triangles which I have chopped off. The glass is here, and this is the roof. That is basically the whole design, and as mentioned, it's held together all by tape, and it actually does the job. It's not perfect, but it really does get the job done. In fact, I do have a couple of videos that actually use this. One example being the Patreon promo video, which of course, if you pop over to my Patreon page, that video that's there was actually shot through this. Another example I can give is actually the long exposure vlog that I did last week. That one was shot using the teleprompter as well. So the DIY was fun, it was interesting, but as it turns out, completing that wasn't completing the project, because well, we are still missing one critical component, and that is actually projecting some text onto the piece of glass itself. Now, originally I thought it wasn't going to be too much of a concern. Basically, my thinking was I would just put my phone in there and well, just pop over to Google Play, I'll find something there. And well, I did find several teleprompter apps, but none of them really did what I needed it to do. Now, one particular issue I was having is the fact that my eyes weren't looking very straight. I always felt that my eyes was looking slightly off to one side, and I found out what the reason for that was. In fact, most teleprompter apps actually display the text left aligned. And what this means is most of the sentences actually start on my left. So it should look like your right to you, but whatever it is, I'm looking off to one side. And since most of the text is aligned that way, most of the time my eyes are over there. As it turns out, there isn't actually a free teleprompter that lets me center the text. In addition to that, I was also looking for some way to actually scroll the text that was being shown. Most teleprompter apps will basically have an auto scroll for the text, but if you mess up a sentence and you want to go back, you're kind of out of luck. You're gonna have to actually reach into the teleprompter and start messing around with the buttons, and that was something that I didn't really want to do. Now, that was definitely not an issue tackled by any free app on the Google Play Store, so in the end, I actually decided to build a teleprompter app myself. Now, I'm not going to go into too much technical detail, but I'll tell you this. It's basically a simple web application. Basically, my phone is browsed to a particular page, and on my computer, I'm browsed to another page. And both these pages are actually talking to a server that I have running on my computer. the page that is up there is actually displaying the script itself, that is of course appropriately mirrored using CSS. Then the control page that I have on my computer basically listens to scrolling on my mouse wheel. Whenever I scroll, it sends a message to the server relays the message to the actual phone itself, and well, that scrolls the text on the phone. And well, it took me a very long time to write, much longer than I like to admit for something this simple. But yeah, eventually I did get it to kinda work, and I was actually able to scroll the text and actually read off the teleprompter. So in fact, if you watched the 2 videos I mentioned earlier, you realize that my hand movements aren't as much as, I normally have. In fact, you realize that this hand is always pinned down, and this hand is the one that's, trying and kind of failing to convey any emotion, because, well, I'm actually using this hand here to control the text with my mouse here. I'm trying very hard to hold it out of the shot. So yeah, just a little interesting behind the scenes look at what's been going on in that 2 videos when I'm actually using the teleprompter. And there you go, that is actually the whole process from start to finish of actually building and using a teleprompter. It was a very refreshing experience, though frustrating at certain points. One particular thing that was so much more challenging and I didn't actually expect was actually framing the shot. Of course, I'm actually very used to setting things up for, my normal vlogs, as in what you're seeing right now. But it's very different when you actually have a teleprompter, because your camera moves back a little, and you actually have to very nicely zoom up your camera so that you don't actually see any of the, edges of the teleprompter itself. But when you do that, you still have to pay attention to what you can actually see. So yeah, it's surprisingly challenging. It actually took me quite a few trial and errors to, just going back and forth to check and make sure that everything looks correct. So yeah, that was an unexpected challenge. Another unexpected challenge was the fact that, well, I had to write my own teleprompter application. But yeah, the whole experience turned out really good at the end. I learned a lot, and well, I'm not going to use the teleprompter for every video despite me saying that. But yeah, it's a good tool to have, and if in the future I need to do anything important at all, well, that could be something that I could consider. Of course, writing a script beforehand is hard as well, but there are times where doing so is necessary, and as an added bonus, it also makes the captured video very easy to cut, because, well, there aren't so many awkward pauses that I have to cut out. Building the actual teleprompter itself was very fun and not expensive at all. It just took me maybe 2 hours maximum. So yeah, definitely a fun project. And if you're interested in doing a DIY teleprompter for whatever reason, I encourage you to actually do so. It's very rewarding, especially if you really need it, and it's relatively simple, so even someone as clumsy as me could get it done. So yeah, do give it a try if you're interested. I do have one tutorial linked in the video description, and if you would actually search in YouTube, you'll find a whole lot more. Anyway, that's all there is for this particular episode. I hope, it's a fun little vlog that hopefully gives you a little bit of insight into this entire process. If you're interested in the application I've written, do actually, leave me a comment, and if there's enough demand, I'll open source it and let you guys look at how terrible my code is. But alright, that's enough waffling from me, so let's go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, you're watching 0612 TV. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked this video, consider checking out the rest of my work on my channel. Alternatively, you may be interested in my other vlogs. If you'd like to show me some monetary support, I am on Patreon. You can find a link to my campaign in the video description. Of course, you can simply like this video or leave a comment. I'll be sure to respond as soon as I can. To keep in touch with my future uploads, do subscribe to this channel. And for even more updates, check out the official Twitter account for this channel at 0612TV. Thank you for your support.